Chapter 19:14, Time is on my side. Upon hearing Saladin's words, a strange expression appeared on the faces of everyone in the room. Olive pointed at him and said, "I told you, Chaos must be the one to do this. The Holy See will not directly participate in the wars of the worldly kingdoms. And you, do not disrupt our plans because of your struggles for territory." Olive stared at Saladin, a devout follower of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The fact that they were able to speak so calmly to the emperor of the heavenly sect was because they had a common enemy. If the threat of the demon's eye is not resolved, both your Kutan Empire and the Holy See will be in constant fear. That is no ordinary enemy, but the demon king of hell, who is powerful enough to destroy the world. Saladin's gaze was dark, and in the end, he did not continue speaking. He had to suppress the desire that was stirring within him. After all, the temptation to expand the territory was too great for the revived king. However, this was not the time to fall out. In the corner, the man, who was as tall as a giant, with muscles on his arms that were as thick as normal thighs, spoke with a smile. "I have never met the man named Chaos. You have absolute confidence in him. Can he complete this mission?" After all, according to the characteristics of the power of faith, Ken Sain is almost invincible within the territory of the Jeangi kingdom. The giant's words caused the eyes of the others to turn over. He was a very mysterious presence in the loose alliance of mutants known as the Natural Science Association. In fact, none of the people present recognized him. It was just that the Natural Science Association had told them that the person they had sent had the top level of strength. They knew that the man in front of them, whose name was Sharon, was the ferryman of the river Styx in Nordic mythology. Columbia's history was short, less than 300 years, so it had no self-contained mythological system. As a result, the mutant code system was slightly confusing and would intersect with that of Euro. However, just as in the mythological code system of the Huashu kingdom before it, if someone wanted to use the same code, then in the end, it would naturally belong to the stronger. Odin, god of war of Asgard, glanced at Sharon and said indifferently, "I can't comment on that guy's character, but he is extremely cunning, with a mind as subtle and deep as a desert fox. This person's tactics are so strong, and his heart is so ruthless, I have never seen anything like it in my life. Of course, not to mention his strength, it is not inferior to mine. So I think that once he decides to act, there is a high chance that he can get the Spear of Longinus." Sharon nodded with a smile upon hearing this. "In that case, there is no need for me to intervene." The others did not know the strength of Sharon, and had never heard of such a figure. Hearing him speak so arrogantly, they could not help but frown. As for Jeangi, they had at least fought against him in Chernobyl, and had actually suffered at his hands. But Sharon, what gave him the right to be so arrogant? Only Olive gave Sharon a deep look and did not doubt his words. The Holy See has been recruiting soldiers and gathering the world's best strongmen for the past 3 years. The man in front of them is in the top 3 on their list of people they want to recruit. The heads of the major powers inside were having a lively chat, and it wasn't quiet outside. Oraben is located near the tropics, where the temperature wasn't too low. Under the governance of Emperor Saladin, order had been restored to the land over the past 3 years. Mutants from various countries were waiting quietly outside the palace for news. They could set off at any time to march into the Sahara Desert. Leaning against the railing, 2 tall white men looked bored at the clear sky in the distance and the soldiers patrolling the city walls with weapons in hand. These 2 men are very familiar to Jeangi. They are 2 mainstays of the Navy, John Cardills, the Lord of the Ocean, and Yashin Canello, the Piercer. They were drafted for this operation and have become Karen's lieutenants. I still haven't figured out why we were sent on this mission. Cardillus was dressed in a blue combat uniform, and the scarlet cloak on his back made him look majestic. The cold wind howled, blowing his cloak about. He leaned against the railing and laughed as he chatted with Canello next to him. "Even now, I still think this decision is absurd. Haven't all the members of the Natural Science Association died? Why use us from the Navy?" Canello crossed his arms, his body covered in black combat fatigues, only his sharp eyes exposed. "Maybe those in charge have their reasons. His eyes were also full of doubt, unable to figure out why they were here. They were the Navy, and were more adept at fighting in the ocean. He was lucky, the Piercer's sniper abilities could adapt to any terrain. But the abilities of the Cardalus would really be greatly reduced away from the ocean. Cardalus raised the corners of his mouth in disdain. Maybe it was someone up there who made a snap decision and made this damn decision. Oh, I get it. It must be because their mission in Fremons was so poorly executed that they remembered to use us professional soldiers, haha. Newton and Brian's mission in Fremons was not a failure, but compared to others, the gains were obviously much smaller. The bottom line is that they collected too little information in the face of the emergence of that mighty god-level civilization. Even though it seems that the other countries didn't gain much either, for Colombia, which considers itself the world's #1 power, this is a failure. As the two men chatted, a babbling sound came from not far away. The two men turned their heads and looked over to see three burly, primitive Phasio men gathered together, chatting in their native language. In an environment of -10 degrees Celsius, they were only wrapped in a circle of animal skin around their lower bodies, revealing their dark, muscular upper bodies and legs. They weren't even wearing shoes on their feet. Their bodies were like those made of black iron, red-hot black iron that had just been taken out of the blacksmith's furnace, so they were not afraid of the cold. These three people were the strongest members of the tribe brought by Odibio, the patriarch of the Ao clan. Ao Tsuntien, Ao Guanhai, and Ao Dadi. The mutants from primitive Phasio tribes are very different from those from other places. They worship shamanism. According to the theory of the awakening of supernatural powers, after their self-powers awaken, the powers they obtain are also based on strong intentions in their hearts, which also tend to be shamanistic and mysterious. It is a religion known for curses, talismans, mystery and weirdness, and is usually associated with terms such as sacrifice, blood talismans, and pain. For example, they can clearly see shamanic symbols painted in black with unknown pigments all over their muscular bodies, and they have decorations such as animal teeth hanging from their ears. Hey, Canelo. Cardalus raised an eyebrow and said teasingly to Canelo, do you think they can be combat effective, even with their simple equipment like animal spears? Canelo thought about it for a while, then said, did you see the shamanic symbols on their bodies? Yes, so what? Don't tell me that thing can compare to the combat suits we have on. This is the most advanced technological product in Colombia. Canelo said very seriously, the lower the level of human cognition, the more absolute the perception. These indigenous cultures in Phasio have a very low level of education, so they believe in their religious deities from the bottom of their hearts. The power of the resulting faith is also becoming more and more powerful. Compared to the people of the Keiji kingdom, these primitive tribal mutants are even more formidable. Their shaman tattoos are a ritual to invite the gods to possess their bodies. With the power of this faith, they may be even stronger than our technological products. Cardalus shrugged his shoulders, dismissive of this. Don't always say such depressing things. Canelo, you're not as cheerful as you used to be. Ever since you lost to that guy. Canelo turned his head and gave Cardalus a deep look, ignoring him, but there was clearly a flash of helplessness in Canelo's eyes. Once upon a time, he was also the pride of the Navy, and was treated as a key training object, with all resources devoted to his training. Once upon a time, he looked down on everything and believed that he would eventually become the world's top-notch strongman. Until he lost to Jeangi on Star Island. That battle completely crushed his pride, and due to the drugs he had injected, he lost his vitality and took a long time to recover. Since then, he has worn his armor to conceal himself, and he has used the sniper rifle that he once looked down upon. All of this was influenced by that person. However, 2 years have passed since that battle. He is growing rapidly, no doubt, but the gap between him and that person is getting wider and wider. Since then, he has never been able to call himself a genius. The two men spoke in and out of turn. In the other direction, there was a group of guys whose style was out of place with everyone else. They were all wearing luxurious combat uniforms based on white with gold trim, and on the corners and lapels of the robes, the symbol of angel wings could be seen. These people are from the Holy See, and they are the strongest mutant troops directly under Pope Alexander X, the Knights Templar. Cardalus lit a cigarette and said, "What a big scene." He smiled at Canelo and said, "Last time in Fremons we didn't get the chance to go over, this time. We can't miss it. Let's just survive first." Canelo said indifferently, "The difficulty of this mission may be even higher than that of Fremons. KG Kingdom, Prison City." Liang Yu and Uncle Yu quickly subdued their opponents. Fatty Sue and Flower were also busy. They encountered opponents in their direction. This time, two people came together, Park Guji and Kim Mi-hee, among the 5-star generals. These two had now transformed into giant animals. Park Guji was a giant wolf with 2 heads, while Kim Mi-hee had turned into a 9-tailed demon fox. Fatty Sue glanced at Flower, who gave him a sidelong glance in return. "Let's each pick one, Flower. You pick first," Fatty Sue said heroically. Flower meowed, still giving him a sidelong glance. The meaning was, "Are you sure?" Fatty Sue was immediately defeated. In terms of combat effectiveness and battlefield experience, he was far inferior to Flower. He had obviously picked the wrong person to mess with. "Fine, since you're so enthusiastic, I'll pick first." The giant wolf and 9-tailed fox stood out in Prison City, as eye-catching as the roaring white tiger in the distance. Fatty Sue licked his lips and looked at the fox. "Ha ha ha ha, Sue the Fat likes to clean up little imps like this the most. Leave it to me." He condensed ice and snow into a giant 9-toothed rake with both hands, and with a slight movement of his feet, a large amount of ice and snow quickly formed a frost storm beneath his feet, as if riding the clouds and mist, carrying him towards the 9-tailed fox. Flower, meanwhile, looked at the 2-headed giant wolf and narrowed her eyes slightly. Roar! A tiger-like roar came from its throat, and a terrifying red energy whirlwind rose up around it, as its body slowly grew larger and larger. Compared to the giant wolf's body, which was over 100 meters long, Flower looked a bit petite, only 10 meters long and 5 to 6 meters high. This was because in the past, most of the opponents Flower faced were humans, and this body type was more agile and not as inconvenient to move around. However, nowadays, its ability index has reached 22,000 points, Black Chariot level, and the beast's abilities have further awakened. It soared in midair, and the giant wolf looked at it with contempt in its eyes. Flower flapped its wings, raising the corners of its mouth to reveal its fangs in a taunting display. Tongue. From beneath its 4 paws, a surging black flame suddenly rose up, enveloping its entire body. Whoosh! The flames burned fiercely in midair, as if they wanted to incinerate Flower, completely enveloping him. But in the blink of an eye, the flames suddenly grew huge, spreading in all directions from the sky. A large number of buildings in the city were directly destroyed by the flames, the steel in the high-rises melted, and the buildings collapsed as if they were melting ice. From the dark flames, a huge head appeared. It vaguely resembled the appearance of Flower, except that the head had turned completely black. There was a blood-red word King marking on the head, and 2 ferocious fangs protruded from the corners of the mouth, emitting a cold light. 4 huge cat legs extended from the flames, trampling the ground of Prison City. Only the parts of the cat's legs were snow white. 2 black tails like iron whips stick out, shiny and black. 2 pairs of dark wings grow from its waist, each feather gleaming like gold and iron. The most shocking thing is its size, which can be described as towering over the world. It is over 300 meters long, and over 100 meters tall. The giant wolf, which was originally a giant in front of it, now has obvious shock in its eyes, and its pupils reveal a look of horror. Ability users of the beast type can choose from 2 evolutionary paths. The first is the humanoid form, which enhances one's strength, speed, and level of supernatural energy. With this evolutionary path, one still fights in the manner of a human. The second is the pure beast form, which constantly increases one's body size. Like a true beast, one crushes one's enemies with sheer numbers. Park Guji is a second type. In the eyes of this mutant, body size is equivalent to combat power. That's why he was so shocked. What unfolded before him was Flower's second form, the snow-treading dark beast. Flower lowered his head and looked down at the giant wolf in front of him, as if he were staring at a large rat. Roar! He lowered his head and opened his mouth, letting out a roar. A jet of dark, high-energy particle rays shot out directly from his throat, like a blow from the heavens, and headed straight for Parkwaji. The battle beast's fighting style will change over time with the length of time it spends with its master, and Flower's power form gradually began to shift towards Jeangi's power of the void. It was a terrifying power that Da Vinci called pseudo-antimatter. On the other side, Fatty Sue had already killed his way to the front of the nine-tailed fox. Kinmihi was a giant fox that mastered the power of frost, and she didn't take the inconspicuous fat man in front of her seriously at all. In her opinion, over the years, any enemy that dared to invade the Keiji kingdom was foolish and unaware of their own mortality, and none had ever returned from their failed attempts. This time would be no exception. She aimed at Fatty Sue, took a deep breath, then opened her mouth and let loose a howling gust of frigid frost that blew towards Fatty Sue. Whoosh! Whoosh! Wherever the cold wind passed, the buildings in the city and the earth were frozen into ice and then shattered. Fatty Sue's eyes lit up when he saw this. In a battle between mutants of the same attribute, whoever has the higher ability index will have the absolute advantage. Today, he is different from the past, and he is no longer the chicken who can only shine shoes. He is a chicken with some strength. He raised his nine-toothed rake high in the air and slammed it downwards, causing endless blue supernatural energy to surge out from the center of his rake. Ka. Frost condensed at his feet, and a huge blue ice and snow mountain suddenly rose up from beneath him, reaching hundreds of meters in height in the blink of an eye and still growing, collapsing downwards towards Kinmihi. Kinmihi's ice storm encountered a huge glacier, and her power was instantly dissipated because she was unable to make the glaciers freeze again. In the blink of an eye, the iceberg had grown to a height several times higher than her body, almost reaching the sky. Then, the glacier collapsed. Rumble! Like a tsunami, countless pieces of ice crashed towards Kinmihi. Kinmihi hurriedly retreated, otherwise being hit by such a heavyweight glacier would make even an iron body spit blood. The glacier collapsed, sending flying ice shards, some the size of buildings. Most of the city was almost completely destroyed just because of Fatty Sue's move. Of the 5-star generals, one had already been killed by Jeangi, and the remaining 4, when faced with Jeangi's companions, showed rather poor combat effectiveness. When Jeangi received the intelligence from the outside, he was not surprised. This was because at the moment, he was engaged in a tense battle with Ken Sain. The burning red energy crystal allowed him to exert a destructive power close to that of the Black Bishop for a short period of time. Although the number of attacks was limited, it was definitely able to threaten the huge pyramid. Commander Sain had to concentrate all his strength and could not share it with his subordinates. How could these confined mutants possibly compare to Jeangi's well-trained companions? Your people are about to die off, do you really not care? Jeangi swung his sword around, the red blade light sweeping through the air as if to destroy this special golden world. The power of this sword was so great that even Jeangi, who had unleashed it, felt his heart race, as if an ordinary human had been given a pistol. The feeling of being able to use powers that were not your own really made it easy to get a huge rush. Commander Sain's face did not show any expression, but still, a wandering sun fell from the sky and stopped Jeangi's sword. The golden flames collided with the power of the void, annihilating each other, turning the void into a sea of chaos, where light and shadow were all confused. It doesn't matter, there is no shortage of talent in this world. Commander Sain said indifferently, as long as I want it, the 20 million people in this entire country are willing to die for me. In their hearts, I am a god. I can give them power, so that an ordinary person can have terrifying power. Jeangi narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, those who play with fire are likely to get burned. Be careful of being consumed by your condescending attitude. There's an old saying in the Huashu kingdom, water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it. How do you know that it is not the people you regard as slaves who will ultimately be the ones to take your life? Commandant Sain's eyebrows rose slightly. You have all these big ideas, and if someone didn't know any better, they might think you could really beat me. Sorry, I've already suffered from your arrogance. He folded his hands together, as if an endless amount of power was flowing into his body and gathering between his palms. Black Sun nuclear explosion. A black sun flew out of the palm of his hand, making the entire world grow dark. The black sun, which condensed the powerful energy of Commander Sain, instantly exploded towards Jeangi, emitting a deadly ray. The entire space was subjected to an indiscriminate attack, and no matter how fast he was, he could not outrun the light. The light of the black sun swept across the boundless desert, turning it directly into a land of nothingness. Jeangi's pupils constricted slightly, and the range of everything under heaven's defense contracted. After the light shone, cracks began to appear in the dimensional gates in the outer area one after the other. Commander Sain raised the corner of his mouth. I really want to see how long you can hold out. Perhaps I have to admit that you are the most powerful enemy I have ever encountered in my life. But here, within my domain, you will never be able to defeat me. The light of the black sun continued to shine down, and the dimensional gates began to become illusory. And the more violently Marshal Sain unleashed his power, the more pronounced the feeling of weakness became in the bodies of those people in the Keiji kingdom who had been inspired. Jeangi was indeed unable to defeat Ken Sain in a head-to-head battle. Even if he had more trump cards up his sleeve, he could not surpass Ken Sain, who had the faith of 20 million people. From the very beginning, Ken Sain had no hurry to end the battle. On the contrary, the longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for him. However, even though he knew full well that the battle situation would develop in an unfavorable direction, Jeangi did not show any signs of fear. He raised the corners of his mouth as he felt the dimensional gate being dismantled at a snail's pace. Time is not on your side.